Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Botox Games. It is that time once again for some more nerdy Nintendo numbers. We just got our financial information for the period from July 1st, 2024 to September 30th, 2024 from Nintendo as they kind of brief their investors on all of the goings-on at Nintendo in terms of how much games have sold. We now know how much Echoes of Wisdom has sold. We now know how much Paper Mario Thousand Year Door and Luigi's Mansion 2 have sold. We also have some, I would say, pretty bad numbers overall for Nintendo in terms of net profit, in terms of percentage drops over the previous year and the previous quarters. And I would also say that while on the surface, Echoes of Wisdom selling 2.58 million copies in 5 days is very good, I think when you look at what's going on with Nintendo on a greater scale, that's actually not that good, but we'll talk about why. Of course, if you are new here and you enjoy Nintendo Switch content, news coverage, all that fun stuff, I would appreciate you subscribing. Let's get into it. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the channel. I hope your Tuesday morning is treating you well. So we're going to be taking a look at all of the numbers that have come out of Nintendo's investor meeting. We will be looking at the Twitter account here, Pierre485_ on Twitter or on X. They do great spreadsheets and graphs and stuff showing all of the sales numbers and kind of compiling it for us. So definitely go give them a follow. Awesome account. Definitely recommend it if you are into Nintendo sales information. All right, so first up, the first major thing we have to talk about is how much the Switch itself has sold, the console itself. The Nintendo Switch shipped 2.62 million units this quarter, down from 2.9 million units last year. So last year from July to September, the Switch has now sold over 146 million consoles to date. And as you can see, the Nintendo Switch is inching ever so close to the Nintendo DS, with there being about an 8 million sale gap. The Switch is absolutely going to outsell that. Now, will they do it this fiscal year like Nintendo is currently forecasting? Probably not, but if you look at the Switch and you figure out, okay, well, it's probably going to be on the market for a couple more years, even if it's not the main product from Nintendo for a few months or a couple years there, it'll still be selling even after the next console releases. So yeah, I think passing DS is all but guaranteed, in my opinion, at this point, especially given that we are getting a new Pokemon game next year. Here we have the breakdown by quarter, by year, and as you can see, I mean, this year has just been pretty rough. I mean, this is like a significant drop over each quarter from 2023. Of course, 2023 had way more major games. I mean, if you look at this yellow one right here that sold at 3.91 million, that was the quarter that Tears of the Kingdom released alongside the Tears of the Kingdom OLED. This year was almost half of that. And yeah, while the past 3 months weren't quite as big of a drop for them, you know, 2.93 down to 2.62, it's still just showing that the Switch is not selling like it used to. And I think for me, as someone who's been, you know, covering this stuff for the past couple of years, what surprises me is not the hardware. The hardware is selling less and less. Like, that's expected. What's surprising to me is the software drops, as we will get to. The software for the Switch has really dried up, in my opinion, and in a way I just was not expecting, even for their new releases. But there is one other piece of major information here. Nintendo has decreased the number of Switch consoles that they expect to sell this fiscal year. Their original forecast was 13.5 million units, but they now expect to sell 12.5 million units, so a drop of 1 million there. Obviously, Switch 2 is not included in any of these numbers here. So they've actually lowered their forecast. Or initially, that 13.5 million forecast was going to put them just over DS, and given how it's currently selling, unless they have a very, very strong holiday season with the bundling they're doing, of course, there is no price drop for the Switch, but they have some pretty aggressive bundles that include Mario Kart, include 12 months of Switch Online. Unless the holiday season does really well for them, given what we know of the software lineup through, you know, November, December, and then, of course, the early months of next year before their fiscal year ends, we have Donkey Kong and Xenoblade Chronicles X. I don't see a reality where they actually hit that, to be completely honest with you, which is unfortunate. But yeah, let's get into the actual software here. I think that is the most interesting thing, as we now have sales numbers for Zelda, more updated numbers for Paper Mario, as well as Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. So they start off here. The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom debut with 2.58 million units shipped in 5 days. So obviously these numbers only go to September 30th. So first 5 days, 2.58 million. You look at that, you think, wow, that's actually really good. However, given the context and given how we see other Nintendo Switch software dropping off a cliff recently, I actually don't think that that's that good, as we'll see with Paper Mario and Luigi's Mansion, and even some of the other games that aren't as evergreen, like a Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, right? Or even a Switch Sports. 2.58 million is good on the surface, and no matter what, I mean, that across the board, that is good. But given the context of Nintendo and how much their games that usually have that evergreen status and they keep selling for years and years, we're not seeing that anymore. You know, Mario Wonder isn't really making many waves, I would say, as Nintendo probably expected. Echoes of Wisdom at selling 2.5 million copies is good, but looking at the full chart here, Link's Awakening sold 3.1 million units in about the same time frame. Maybe they had like an extra week there, but that also released in September, and then those numbers came after September 30th. So Link's Awakening outsold Echoes of Wisdom. That is a remake of a game that released 2 years into the Switch's life cycle when the Switch only had, I'm not even sure what the Switch was at by that point, but there's certainly more Switches out there in the wild now. Nintendo shows us that the active install base of the Switch is higher and higher every year. There are more people using their Switch every year, but they don't seem to be buying the games. I mean, this is a new 2D Zelda game. The fact that it's not outselling a remake, I think is pretty bad. And looking at the legs Link's Awakening ahead, I mean, this game sold over 6 million copies. There is not a chance that Echoes of Wisdom has anywhere near the legs that Link's Awakening had. I would be surprised if this game gets to 4 million. I frankly would be surprised if it gets to 3.5 million. Now, granted, that was only 5 days, right? But when we talk about Luigi's Mansion and Paper Mario, I think what I'm saying will make a little bit more sense, as it seems like when it comes to new Nintendo releases, they're selling the first week, and then sales pretty much dry up immediately. So while yes, and I want to reiterate this once more, in the greater talk of the industry at large, right, Star Wars Outlaws just barely scraped 1 million sold, which is an absolute catastrophe for Ubisoft. So in that context, Echoes of Wisdom selling 2.58 million units in 5 days is very good, and I'm sure they made their money back, and I'm sure they're pretty happy with that, honestly. But when you compare it to other Zelda games, even Zelda games on the Switch, even 2D Zelda games on the Switch, it is clear that software sales are completely dried up when it comes to even just new releases from Nintendo. Next up, and I'm sure this will be a pretty controversial one, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door is now over 1.94 million units, so it sold an extra 180,000 copies in 3 months. Exceeding the original game lifetime sales. It sold at 1.91 million units on GameCube, so it outsold the original. That's good. The GameCube only sold, what, 20 million units? The Switch has sold almost 150. I think this is, once again, good, right? Nintendo, I'm sure, made their budget back, and they profited quite a bit off of this game. However, the sales have already fallen off a cliff. 200k units in 3 months is not good. I'd be surprised if it does better than that during the holiday period, given that Brothership will likely cannibalize its sales. If people are going to buy a Mario RPG for their kids this holiday, or for, just presents, right, that kind of thing, they're probably going to buy Brothership. 1.94 million units on an install base of 145 million when people hailed this as the best Mario RPG, the game people have been waiting for years. I mean, we need to compare this to some of the other Mario RPGs, not just on Switch, but in the entire franchise. As it stands right now, I'm not even sure if Thousand Year Door will outsell Sticker Star. And Sticker Star is, I would say, considered by most Paper Mario fans to be an abomination. It outsold the original Paper Mario. It outsold the original Thousand Year Door on GameCube. It's not going to come anywhere close to Super Paper Mario. It probably won't outsell Sticker Star. Obviously, Color Splash is a non-issue there. And then Origami King, which reviewed well and people liked it, that game still clearly outsold it when Thousand Year Door is like, this is Thousand Year Door, right? Like, this is the game people have been begging for to come back. And there's just no chance of it even coming close to passing Origami King's sales numbers, which I think Nintendo probably knows what's going on. They will see the software sales happening right now, and they're not going to make decisions based off of that necessarily, right? Like, I think if they see a future for Paper Mario following more in the footsteps of Thousand Year Door, they will continue that. If they think a proper sequel on the Switch 2, new hardware, people are excited, and new software again, they might see a world where that's a better choice. However, if they just look at the numbers at face value, why would they not make another Origami King sequel? Especially when you look at the sales of Super Mario RPG Remake. So these are numbers from February 5th, 2024, although this was up until, I think, December 31st of 2023. Pierre tweeted back then, Super Mario RPG shipped 3.14 million units in 6 weeks, already crushing the original game lifetime sales in its first quarter. And looking at that greater chart here, yeah, Mario RPG in 6 weeks sold 3.14 million units. So for Thousand Year Door Remake, this game that people have been begging for, to come out and only sell less than 2 million units in, 4 months? I think that's bad. Yes, once again, I understand, like, overall that's good, right? Like, they're making money on that game, but it's the worst selling Mario RPG on Switch, and I don't think it's gonna even be close by the time all is said and done. Brothership is probably going to sell over 3 million copies. It is a new game. It is releasing during the holiday period. If Thousand Year Door released in November, maybe we'd be in the same situation, right? Maybe Thousand Year Door would have sold the 3.5 million or whatever, and it would have been fine. But because of its release timing, because of its proximity to all of these other Mario RPGs releasing, it just kind of got stuck in the middle, I think, right? Which isn't good. Now, maybe Brothership sales numbers will come out in a couple of months here and we'll be disappointed, and maybe that game will only sell like 2 million copies. But given that Mario RPG Remake sold 3 million, I'd be shocked, frankly. I think maybe people just don't care about Paper Mario that much. I feel like that might be part of it. Obviously, we see some games on this chart here like Super and Origami King that did very well, but like overall, I feel like the sales numbers do not reflect how highly people talk of the series, and specifically how highly they talk of Thousand Year Door. It'll definitely hit 2 million copies sold over the holiday season, but only selling an extra 180,000 from July to September is, frankly, that's bad. That's not good for that game. All right, this one really surprised me. I was talking earlier this year, a big game, about how Luigi's Mansion 2 HD was going to do very well. This did actually way worse than I expected, based on the sales numbers of the 3DS version, but also based on the sales numbers of Luigi's Mansion 3. And it was this game and Princess Peach Showtime that really, I think, made me realize, like, wow, software sales for new Nintendo games really isn't as good as it should be, or as good as it was even a year or two ago. So Luigi's Mansion 2 HD shipped another 380,000 units in the following 3-month period, and now over 1.57 million units in total. And once again, just to demonstrate how hard sales are falling off a cliff after launch, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, I believe, released on June 27th, I want to say, somewhere in the final week of June. So it only had a couple of days on sale in June before that 1.19 million units sold is kind of shown there, similar to Echoes of Wisdom. So let's just say it sold 1.2 million copies in its first couple of days. In the following 3 months, it only managed to sell 380,000. That's not good. These are like serious drop-offs after release that we don't normally see for first-party Nintendo games. Now, maybe there'll be an uptick during the holiday season, but I think what's happening is, and this is so crazy to say, the Nintendo Switch library is so good that it's actually, there's too many options. I think there are too many options for new buyers of the Switch, and they kind of maybe get confused. They don't know what game to buy, or what is probably happening is they buy a Switch, they get their Mario Kart, they get their Mario Odyssey maybe, they get Luigi's Mansion 3, they get Link's Awakening, they get Breath of the Wild. They aren't going to buy Luigi's Mansion 2 HD when Luigi's Mansion 3 is still on store shelves and cheaper. We've never seen a Nintendo console get this kind of support this late in its life cycle, and I think we're actually seeing some side effects of that where the games are just falling off a cliff in terms of sales. There are no evergreen titles releasing anymore because the evergreen titles of the Switch already released, right? Like even Mario Wonder, a game that should by all means be a million seller every quarter, frankly, you know, any other time it probably would have been. Even that isn't doing it. Tears of the Kingdom isn't doing it because the software lineup that we already had was so good. So all of these titles releasing, while I'm not here to say whether they're good or bad, I don't personally like Luigi's Mansion 2 that much, but it doesn't really matter because even if they were great, there's already a game that reviewed really well that is often on sale for $40 in place of it that's still on store shelves. So, like, why would you buy Luigi's Mansion 2 HD if you're a new Switch owner, right? It's not all bad, though, because Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sold another 1.37 million copies this quarter, just an absolute juggernaut. That is the game people are buying when they buy a Switch. By far the best seller, I believe. Yeah, together with the Wii U version, this title now exceeds 72.73 million units worldwide. Just an absolute juggernaut of a game there. Tears of the Kingdom is now over 21 million copies sold, and they added another 240,000 units this quarter. Second best seller in the franchise. More than 42% of Zelda games sales were made on Nintendo Switch. Scarlet and Violet, this one's interesting. They reached 25.69 million units shipped worldwide, so they sold another 400,000 of Pokemon in the past 3 months. This is on pace to becoming the best-selling, or the second best-selling Pokemon game, overtaking Sword and Shield here in the very near future. Animal Crossing New Horizons still holding on strong. Are you noticing a pattern? These games that are selling 500k plus units or around that, all released in 2022 and before. Tears of the Kingdom still holding on somewhat, I guess. But overall, I mean, looking at the chart here, look how much it sold on day one or in the first month and a half or so. And then the sales following that. It has just been so dry for that game. 240,000 units of a game a year and a half after release is good, but when you look at like how Breath of the Wild continued to sell throughout the entire Switch generation, this is a pretty steep decline, I would say. In fact, this is an actually perfect way to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So Tears of the Kingdom sold 240,000 units. You scroll down a little bit past Smash Bros, High Smash Bros. Breath of the Wild actually sold the same amount. That sold another 240k units this quarter. So I feel like when people are buying a Switch, they're just buying Breath of the Wild, not Tears of the Kingdom. If they're buying a Switch and they want a 2D Zelda game, they'll probably buy Link's Awakening. If they're buying a Switch, if they want a Luigi's Mansion game, they'll get LM3, if that makes sense. So they kind of have put themselves in a weird situation here. Odyssey is selling very well. Sword and Shield still selling 90. I mean, 90,000 units for Sword and Shield, a what 5-year-old game. That's still that's still really good. Super Mario Party sold another 140K. I mean, these are the games that just keep selling no matter what as people buy Switches. These are all games that released in the first couple of years of the Switch. New Soup U sold another 160,000 units in the past 3 months. This game, I believe, yeah. Where's Mario Wonder? Is that still actively outselling more than Mario Wonder? That's crazy if that's true. Here we have a list of every million-plus seller on the Switch. Unfortunately, there is no there's no Famicom Detective Club one here, no Nintendo World Championships, but you can see at the very bottom here that that Princess Peach Showtime is still at, what, I believe 1.2 million, so that game did way worse than I thought. In fact, Mario vs. Donkey Kong almost outsold it. It's very close down there to outselling Princess Peach Showtime, which I just never would have thought. Here's a look at the software sales overall for each quarter and for each year of the Nintendo Switch. And I mean, once again, as you can see, significantly lower numbers. I mean, from, okay, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, they were kind of on the rise. From 2020 to 2023, they kind of stayed in that same ballpark. You know, the holiday period was maybe worse for some years, but they were all pretty close, I would say, in the middle here. But then 2024 has been a massive drop. Like, I mean, this is a serious drop. 41 down to 35, 52 down to 30, 44 down to 39. Like, these are pretty bad drops for software overall, not just from Nintendo, but just overall amounts of copies of games sold from every publisher on Switch. That's pretty bad. Here we have their current release lineup, so starting from October 1st. So we had Mario Party Jamboree, Mario & Luigi Brothership, Fitness Boxing, Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, Xenoblade X, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and Pokemon Legends ZA. So obviously 2 of those are already out. One of them is a fitness boxing game that is not going to move any units. One of them is Donkey Kong Country that isn't going to move any units. And frankly, one of them is Xenoblade, which isn't going to move any units, as much as I am excited to play that game. And that game will probably sell over 1 million copies. Nothing on this list, except for maybe Mario Party and Brothership, are even potential system sellers, I would say. Aside from, of course, Pokemon Legends. Yeah, I was talking more about the games that have dates. I don't know how they foresee themselves selling another 8 million units when that is their software lineup. If Pokemon was releasing in March or February or something, then yeah, totally, I get it. Pokemon's going to sell units. It doesn't look like that game's releasing this fiscal year. So it's going to be a very hard uphill battle for them, I think, to make their forecast and hit that 8 million sales for the next 2 quarters. But it's weird, right? Because the Switch is, what, in its 8th year on the market now, or 7th year, one of those. And you look at these sales numbers, and they are a steep drop-off. Games don't have legs anymore. The hardware is selling a lot worse. However, depending on the context you look at it in, it could be good or bad. I look at Thousand Year Door and Echoes of Wisdom and Luigi's Mansion 2, and I'm like, that's bad. For what those games are, for the install base that the Switch has, those are not good sales numbers. However, on the other side of the coin, the Switch is so old, the fact that they are still selling 3DS remasters that sell over 1 million copies is very impressive. So I guess it is all a matter of perspective. I feel like going into this investor meeting and only having, I would say, neutral to either negative news is not a good look, right? It's clear that they announced Alarmo and released it, and Xenoblade Chronicles X and the Sound Clock Alarm thing, and like they announced all these things so they would have some new information to share with their investors. I assume during the Q&A that we get later today, they'll talk about Nintendo Music, they'll talk about Alarmo, Xenoblade X. Felt like it was announced this week or the past week just so they could have another game on this list so it doesn't look completely barren in terms of release dates next year. But you have to wonder what's going on, man. I mean, I'll do a video either tomorrow, maybe even later today, talking about the Switch 2 or the lack thereof, because Furukawa basically just said, yeah, we're still cooking it. You know, it's still going to get announced by March 31st. It really makes you wonder what their game plan is here. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Are you happy or sad with these sales numbers for some of these Nintendo games? It's such a weird thing, right? Because Thousand Year Door selling 2 million, and that outsold the GameCube version, guys. That's a great thing, right? But I think it was, yeah, John Raridan from Nintendo World Report here tweeted out, I really like this tweet. He said, some folks were upset I was going off of a small sample size for Thousand Year Door sales. Let's update. It hasn't moved much at about 1.9 million. Origami King and Mario RPG are both at 3 to 3.5 million at last count. Too many Mario RPGs. Thousand Year Door fans louder than they are numerous. Switch finally dead. And then at the bottom here, he says, the answer to all of those questions is yes, by the way. And I think that's true. I think the same thing can be said for Echoes of Wisdom also. There's too many Zelda games on Switch, so when someone buys one, they're not going to buy echoes of wisdom. So let me know your thoughts. Of course, subscribe here for more Nintendo Switch content, coverage, news, all that fun stuff. Follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames. Check out my other channel at It's Amiibo. Thank you so much for the support yesterday on the Mario and Luigi videos, by the way. I was not expecting those videos to do so well, so I really appreciate that. But until next time, folks, peace.